So you planted all of this. You've been here for 40 years?
Everything you see.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
This is my dream, to have my property this well planted.
How much property you have?
Well, our home is on 2.3 acres.
Oh, that's quite a bit.
Yeah, and most of it I can garden, but I still water everything by hand.
Yeah.
So to hear you say
Well,
that
the first thing then, if you want to put all plants that require water in one location,
Yeah.
and then the ones that don't can be another.
yeah,
And you try to enhance the ones that don't require so much watering.
yeah,
I mean, we have a few plants that do very well, but you may want to plant them, water them maybe once or twice, and that's it. That's
Okay.
all they require.
okay,
And you can plant manzanita, which are from California,
yeah,
and we have some from here that don't want any water in the summer once they're established. Now that's important.
yeah.
Sometimes it takes a couple years, even for natives, to get established well before they can do without water.
So how do you know when a plant is established enough to not need water? You just
Well,
kind of figure it out?
It has to have a very good roots.
Yeah.
I would say if you're not sure, at least give it 2 years.
Okay,
Summer watering for 2 years.
okay,
Most plants. That's a good guideline if you don't have a good feeling for which plants.
yeah,
Generally, the shrubs and trees do better.
okay,
But generally, for shrubs and trees, they prefer about 2 years too.
okay,
You may not have to water as much in the summer,
yeah,
but you want to water them occasionally to help
Sure.
them get established better.
okay,
And then there's some things like heather really is not that drought tolerant, requires summer water for 5 or 6 years before you can not water it.
Oh, that's why mine died.
So we had about 50 different types of heather, and we lost about half of them here because
Oh.
we wanted to find out which ones would do without
Sure.
supplemental water.
Yeah,
But we did water them the first year and some for 2 years. But generally it takes longer than that. While there's heaths, which are your winter blooming
oh,
quote heathers,
okay,
do much better. And
Yeah.
usually in 1 or 2 years they can do, a lot of them can do without minimal water.
okay.
So
That's good to
this
know.
whole area was a hillside
Uh-huh.
of English ivy.
Oh,
So we got 3 guys off the street in Seattle, and the 4 of us
yeah.
dug this out in the year 2000, I would say,
Okay.
25 years ago.
yeah,
And we had a pile of ivy 15 feet high.
I
here on the
believe it.
driveway. We had to
Yeah.
take out of here.
wow.
And this here was a parking lot.
Oh, okay,
So it's hard to grow plants in hard pans, so
Yeah.
we created what I call as my Asian Pacific Northwest garden.
huh?
so,
It's so beautiful.
so we have 3 islands, and they're called Life, Harmony, and Serenity are the name of the islands.
Yeah,
And they're not irrigated, so they
Okay.
they need drought tolerant.
uh-huh,
And so they were watered to get hand watered, but cedar of Lebanon, which is a beautiful example of one of our conifers here,
Yeah.
has never been watered and never been pruned.
really?
And it's about 40 years old. We brought it
Wow.
over here in a pot. We haven't been here 40 years,
Okay,
but the 15-year-old plant was brought over in a pot because
Wow.
it's considered a dwarf conifer growing. It's one of my favorites of the over 400 conifers we have here. And the reason why we select conifers is because they live long and they're quite adaptable, and most of them are quite drought tolerant.
really?
However, in our heat wave that we had a number of years ago, 108 degrees here in Bremerton,
Yeah.
we had damage to over 50 conifers and we lost a few.
Oh,
But most of those were from areas that prefer, cooler climates or up in the
Right.
mountains. So like fir trees. And
Yeah.
Of course, we had damage from hemlock
mhm.
and some others, but there are other conifers like cypresses and cryptomerias, etc., do very, very well in the dry summer.
Yeah. We, on our property, we live in Burley, so just between Port Orchard and Gig Harbor.
Yeah,
And
yeah, I know where Burley is.
yeah, we got up to 113 in the hottest
Yeah.
part.
Yeah,
'Cause we live at the
you're
top of
farther
a
away
hill.
from the water.
Yeah, we live at
Yeah.
the top of a hill, and
Yeah. So
That
did you
was-
have any damage?
oh yeah,
Right, but-
yeah. One of my rhododendrons, my
Uh-huh.
favorite rhododendron, right in the front yard,
Right.
like beautiful red rhododendron has some damage.
Yeah, so we do have rhododendrons here, and
Yeah.
actually we have a group of rhododendrons that don't exist anywhere in the world except here,
Wow.
because they were made by John Lentz,
Uh-huh.
whose hobby was to make basically new rhododendrons.
Wow.
So he would pollinate one rhododendron and another to make
Sure.
new hybrids.
Yeah.
And he was a distant relative of mine, and so he asked me if I would take his rhododendrons. And we were reluctant because they would require watering in the summer.
Yeah.
But we put them in the lowest garden where all the drainage is.
Sure.
And then we created a woodland for them.
That's
Unfortunately, we had to move them before we had the woodland there.
Oh.
But we did have the dawn redwood as providing some shade. So eventually they adapted, and now we have a beautiful woodland there
Mm-hmm.
for them. So that's the reason why we created a woodland in the lowest part.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, where we're in a shady area. The other thing I wanted to tell you, the area where the big redwood is, have you been there already?
No, we
Oh,
just
you haven't been up there?
no, we just kind of milled around up there because I didn't want to be out of breath.
Huh?
I didn't want to be out of breath, so we stayed up
Okay.
there.
So we don't, you want to walk up there? Or I could
Sure.
Yeah, well, let's
Yeah.
just walk up there.
Okay.
That's about as far as I'm going to go.
Yes, whatever.
And I can
is
sit
comfortable
down
for
over
you.
there. So these trees are blue atlas cedars. We planted those in '99.
Okay.
So, but you can see how much growth we got. We actually had 3. We lost one due to high winds because off the water here we can get pretty high winds.
Yeah.
And so they're native to North Africa.
Mhm.
And of course they're very drought tolerant and they live a long time. The only negative thing about them is that they're subject to wind damage. So
Okay.
if you get too much wind, you can have breakage.
Yeah.
And that's what happened to one of them.
Yeah.
So this up here is my drain field. So
Okay.
we have a septic tank and then the drain goes here. So you want to, you can, a drain field doesn't have to be ugly. Originally it was basically lawn and weeds, and all this was all lawn.
Yeah.
And so we took that out, and you want to plant plants that don't have aggressive roots. So
Yeah.
Like the, ornamental grasses are good.
Okay.
Plants like salvia, and normally you never want to water your drain field anyway. You
Okay.
shouldn't water a drain field, so
Sure.
you want to have very drought tolerant plants. So we have lavender growing there, red hot poker, for example,
Mhm.
and potentilla and other kinds of plants. We even have a dwarf pomegranate
Oh,
and a
yeah, I saw
Japanese
that.
bitter orange there.
Okay.
So they actually would do well because they're cold hardy enough
Mhm.
to get by. And we have a pomegranate up on top that's very big flowering, and
Yeah.
it was bought as a 4-inch house plant
Oh.
about 25 years ago,
Yeah.
and brought home and planted. And everybody won't believe it, but it's, it was a house plant. And now it's doing fine, and it hasn't had any trouble with our cold winter
Mhm.
at all. So.
Did you, when you were, building the gardens,
Yeah.
did you take cuttings of things and propagate some of this stuff?
Only mainly the herbaceous and smaller things.
Yeah.
Like thyme, for example.
Okay.
We,
Yeah.
we started out with a few flats, and now we have thousands of dollars worth of thyme if you
Yeah.
had to buy it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So those things we did a lot of propagation. We didn't have a working greenhouse just until this year.
Oh wow.
So we
Okay.
do a lot of propagation in situ, and we have a plant sale every year.
Okay, I will be sure to come back.
So you want to come back.
A
That's
lot.
usually in the spring. We might start having some in the fall too.
Yeah.
We're discussing that possibility. So that's the other thing. And you see the bees who just love the
Yeah.
lavender, the English lavender. So even though we're in clay soil,
Uh-huh.
generally most people feel that you cannot grow lavender in clay, which is true unless you amend it to enhance the water infiltration, because you
Okay.
need reasonable good drainage. Otherwise, the wet would kill the lavender.
Sure.
And then we have These are example of heaths, which
Uh-huh.
are in the heather, family,
Yeah.
and they bloom in the summertime. It's called Erica vacans, and that's the most drought-tolerant heath that we found. And after the second year, they don't require summer watering.
Okay.
Now that may change if we get drier and drier, but
Yeah.
right now they're doing okay. But it really depends upon your soil. We're in clay soil, and clay soil has the advantage of holding water much better than sand. If you're in sand, then there are a lot of things you'd have to water.
Yeah.
Because your drainage is fast,
Right.
and it has very poor water holding capacity.
Yeah.
So up there, we're not fenced, and we have a lot of deer pressure here,
I was gonna ask about that.
which is a big problem. And they still jump in occasionally, but we chase them out. But up there was not fenced.
Oh.
So we selected plants that are deer resistant. So
Yeah.
and there's no water. Was no water up there at all.
Yeah.
So it's a good example of very drought tolerant, deer resistant garden.
Yes.
So I can have you go take a look at that.
Yeah.
So the plant palette is completely different up there.
We have heavy deer pressure
Yeah.
where I live,
Yeah.
and so
So you have
I'm looking for things that are.
So like this, if they're really hungry, they can eat almost anything.
Yeah.
But generally, like heath and heather,
Yeah.
I would say heath, like Erica darliensis and particularly Erica vagans, are very drought tolerant, and the deer won't bother it much.
Okay.
They might nibble a little bit, but
Yeah.
I don't think you'd have a problem.
Yeah.
Unless there's absolutely nothing else they got to eat,
Right.
should not be. But anything that's aromatic, that smells, you know what an aromatic plant is,
Yeah.
they generally won't bother to eat that brown plant. But they can still do breakage, for trees and shrubs. The biggest problem is little saplings. A buck can come and ring that sapling. They'll rub their horns
Yeah.
on and take away the cambium, then the plant is dead.
Yeah.
And that's why we had to fence it. This plant wasn't fenced before. And we were losing thousands of dollars worth of plants every year, so we
Right.
had to fence it.
Yeah.
So what we were doing was putting fencing around the smaller plants, and when it got big enough, then we take the fencing away, but that becomes a lot of extra work.
Right.
Not easy. We bought this property in 2016 to save the tree.
Oh.
So this was going to be cut down.
Wow.
And my wife said, well, we can't let that happen. I said, no. And I said, I guess we both bite the bullet. So we each shipped the 50% and bought the property.
That's beautiful. That's something I would do.
I was very excited about, because this was all lawn, and that
Yeah.
bank up there was basically vinca,
Oh wow.
which I don't like vinca.
No.
And the bank over there was blackberries and vinca.
Oh yeah.
So if you look at the bank, it's beautiful now.
Yeah.
And so the yellow plant that you see there, and a whole bunch of it is on the bank on the outside.
Okay.
That's oregano, a herb.
Oh, that's
That's
popping
golden
up in
oregano.
my garden. Okay.
And then there's another oregano I can show you.
Yeah.
Let me just show you something. This is a penstamen,
Yep.
but it's from the southwest.
Okay.
So it's called penifolius, and the hummingbirds love it, because it has red tubular flowers.
Yeah.
And penstamens are we use a lot of ground covers, they're all native penstamens.
Oh, okay.
And they're
That's good
very
to know.
drought tolerant, and
Yeah.
they're native to the northwest, so they do well. This is native to the southwest, but it does very well here. And it's a good example of a neighboring plant that's adopted to our dry summer, wet winter
Yeah.
situation
Yeah.
that does well here in the northwest. So, so you see the kind of a gray foliage there?
Yes.
That's an artemisia,
Uh-huh.
and it's a very good one.
Yeah.
And it's extremely drought tolerant, and we never water that in the summertime.
Okay.
But it has a nice, beautiful texture. Then you see all the English lavender.
So
These
pretty.
are all dwarf conifers. Now we selected these dwarf conifers so the leader is protected, so the deer that would come here, they wouldn't be able to rub their trunk head on the leader, because
Sure.
the leader is covered with branches. and that minimized deer damage that way. And then you see the smoke bushes, which are very drought tolerant.
Yeah.
And you see the erica there. That's very good. Coreopsis or tick seed is the yellow flower, very drought tolerant. And then you see the yellow plant with the lavender there is called Santolina, or lavender cotton is the common name.
Okay.
Lavender cotton, that's the green lavender cotton, but a yellow cultivar of the green lavender cotton. There's several kinds of lavender cotton, different species. So then of course the barberry, those are very drought tolerant. And these are Italian buckhorn, the variegated Italian buckhorn.
Yeah.
It's a very nice screen, a privacy screen. So basically to hide the fence.
Right.
Does a nice job of that.
Yeah.
So that gives you an idea.
Yeah.
And then here's the pink tree.
Yep.
And that rock we brought, we bought that rock separately. It's from Marinacos, which is a big rock place north of Seattle in the foothills of the mountains. And that's just the kind of so that gives you an idea of how different it is. And my wife picked out the beautiful landscape examples here.
Yeah. Where's your wife from?
Huh?
Where's your wife
Croatia.
from? Okay. Yeah.
English is her fourth language, and she corrects my English.
Oh.
It's embarrassing. Don't quote that on YouTube. I'll get myself in trouble because she wants to watch the YouTube.
She sounds like a lovely lady.
Yeah, she was champion of gymnastics in Switzerland.
Oh.
About 60 years ago.
Oh, wow. I did gymnastics. I could not stay on the balance beam to save my life. Yeah.
So she's very good at balance. She was also an excellent skier, both water skier and snow skier.
How did you meet your wife?
I was giving a talk in front of 250 people at a medical meeting in New Orleans.
Yeah.
And she asked a question from the audience. I didn't know who she was, and she didn't like my answer. So instead of getting into an argument, I said, let's go have a cup of coffee. So we had a cup of coffee, and once I found out who she was, I invited her to come as a visiting professor, and that's what happened. And she was too good to let go, and the rest is history. How's that?
That's awesome.
Great.
Okay, it's a true story.
Yeah.
Okay, well let's go mosey on down. So this is all the time.
Okay.
And you see, it's doing very, very well. And
Yes.
it's never watered in the summertime after the first year. And it's very, very happy.
Yeah.
So the other thing, this is catmint. You can smell it.
Yeah.
Very minty. Here, you got a phone, but smell it. Yeah, it's almost like peppermint.
It does.
Right, and it does very well. And once it's done flowering, you can prune it back and it will flower again for you.
Good to
Very
know.
tough plant.
Yeah.
And then you can prune it back once or twice, whatever you want to do. But it's a very tough plant.
Yeah.
So this is a perfect example of the drought tolerant. Maybe since it's shady, we'll walk over to the Lentz garden and then answer any other questions you have about the garden. So we came here in late '98 and started the garden in '99. And so the first garden I planted is by the house there.
Sure.
It's called Primo Giardino, which is in Italian. My wife is fluent in Italian, and she lived in Italy for many years.
Yeah.
And that's what we did first. Then we kind of worked our way down.
Worked your way down.
And it took a while to work our way all the way up.
Wow.
So all these trees, those big trees, were planted by me in '99.
Wow.
But everything here grows about twice as fast as the nurseries predict.
Really? It just loves it
Maybe
here.
it had to
They
do
love
with
it
the
here.
good soil and all the sunshine.
Yeah. I have not put a lot of time into like testing my soil.
Yeah, well, I think it's really good idea to test your soil first to know what you've got.
Right.
And when you do that, they give you instructions, but you want to take samples from different parts because you may have different types of soil in your garden than you have
Yeah.
in your property.
Yeah.
And then you'll take multiple samples and you pull them from each site. That's how you do it basically. And my book actually discusses that.
Oh, good.
So you have the book on
Yeah.
that. So
In
that
the
gives
book-
you some idea of the principles you want to use.
Yeah.
I think it would be helpful.
Yes. I agree.
But the biggest problem is when you buy plants and they don't tell you, is find out what are the cultural requirements of each plant. That's very important.
The what requirement?
The cultural requirement. In other words, how much sun? Do they want sun or shade? Do they want the good drainage?
Yeah.
Do they like wet areas? Those are all things where they do okay in clay or
Sure.
what kind of soil do you have? Do you have any idea?
Clay,
Clay?
and very rocky
Okay.
soil.
Well, if you have clay and rocky soil, I would encourage you to amend it with organic matter.
Okay. I started.
Well composted. And then
Yeah.
we do a lot of top dressing with mulch too. That
Yeah.
takes a lot of time to improve the soil, but it is a good approach and it is excellent to help cut down the weed
Okay.
control as well.
What are your thoughts about adding wood chips with your compost?
Well, if it, not for mixing into the soil,
No. Just
but use
like-
wood chips as a top dressing.
Okay.
And the reason for that is if you just put wood chips in there, initially your soil will be nitrogen deficient
Okay.
because it will take time for the bacteria to break that down.
Yeah.
And that will take up nitrogen.
Okay.
So you don't want to do that. Just
Yeah.
use complete composted compost to mix into the soil
Yeah.
and only use wood chips as a top dressing. Now
Okay.
they're an excellent top dressing because they don't break down as fast and so they do better as weed control.
Okay.
And yet eventually they will improve your soil too.
Yeah. Yeah.
It just takes a longer time.
Yeah.
So we use arbor chips a lot for top dressing
Okay.
here. And then use the mulch to mix in. You can use mulch as a top dressing too, but you don't want to mix in the wood chips into the soil.
Okay.
That would be a mistake.
Okay. That's
Not
good
a
to know.
good practice. Let's put it that way. So the other thing is we have a great diversity of plants.
Yes, I noticed
And that's
that.
good. And actually, the plant roots themselves help improve the soil because they release substances that improve the soil structure.
Okay.
And so when you do dig into the soil, you don't want to do too much digging. You know,
Okay.
it's just like no-till farming. If you don't,
Yeah.
if you tillage all the time, you're destroying the structure,
Right.
and you also harm the bacteria flora in that soil.
Okay.
So another thing, if you have a lot of woody plants, it would be good to have mycorrhizae, which is a fungus
Yeah.
that symbiotically relates to all the woody plants.
Okay.
And if you don't, rather than buy it directly, if you have a native site where you have a woodland, take soil from that and seed your other soil, because that should have the mycorrhizae that
Yeah.
you need for your plants.
We do have.
And you should be able to do that if you have a woodland area.
Yes, we do have one part of our property that is
Has
just
an-
a forest
Yeah.
of firs.
Well, if you take soil from that and mix that soil in
Yeah.
with your new plantings, particularly
Okay.
for trees and shrubs,
Yeah.
that will seed the mycorrhizae.
Nice.
And the drought tolerance of woody plants is by and large is determined by the presence of mycorrhizae.
Okay.
And so that's very important. Without
Yeah.
that, they're not going to be very drought tolerant.
Okay.
So that's important,
Yeah.
particularly if you have an area that was denuded, like you say.
Right.
You want to seed that with mycorrhizae from your native area.
Yeah. Okay.
That would be a good approach.
Okay.
Okay. So this is a plant. Everybody says that, well, it's deciduous. It's a deciduous conifer, so it looks exactly like a larch, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
But it isn't.
Yeah.
It's called pseudolarix, which means false larch.
Oh,
And
okay.
it's native to China.
Okay.
It's Pseudolarix amabilis is the name.
Yeah.
But it does very well here. I like the way it layers, and in the fall, it will have a golden
Oh,
brown foliage. Beautiful in the fall.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So let's just go take a look at this woodland. woodland was designed for my distant relative John Lentz's rhododendrons. And how I met John is that he wrote my father a letter about 40 years ago because his mother was an Albers, and his wife was tracing the Albers name back.
Yeah.
And they traced the name back to 1598 in Germany. And my father said, well, I have a son living in Seattle, you should meet. So we met.
Yeah.
Then we moved here, we became good friends.
Yeah.
And he said, well, I'm getting too old, I can't take care of my rhododendrons. Will you take my rhododendrons? And I was a little bit reluctant because they require extra water.
Right.
But we took about 30 of his best rhododendrons and they're planted here.
Yeah.
And now, of course, you have a wonderful woodland.
Right.
And for shade, we have a lot of Japanese maples, striped bark maples, cryptomeria from Japan.
Yeah.
And interesting, if you look at those trees, look at those knots, balls on the trunk. Those are called limnotubules.
Oh.
And they're sort of like burrs, so if you cut down the tree, that means it can regrow then.
Oh, wow.
From those. And that's basically a Japanese forest tree, those cryptomeria are. And then we have a lot of, see, these are all, over there, these are all pin stamens. Which are native. Yeah. And you see they're called Vancouveria or inside out flowers. That's a native, also native in the Northwest, an excellent ground cover for shade.
Yeah.
And then you have a lot of, your native ferns. You have huckleberry in here.
Yeah. Do you have a little pond down there?
It's a bowl. It's just a water feature.
Yeah. I could spend all day down there.
But it's very, in hot days, this is the place to be.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's the point. If you want to keep some of your big trees because they create microclimates. And so even in the woodlands, we have piles of woods for the wildlife. And so you want different types of climates, both shady and sunny areas for your wildlife and for the birds and the insects. And the other thing we try to do that's very important is to have something for pollinators all year round. Now it's easy in the spring and summer to have flowering plants, but you want to make sure you have some plants that bloom in the fall. Right. In the wintertime, of course, the erica is very good because they bloom in the wintertime.
Okay.
So
I'll have to try erica
having something for pollinators.
Yeah.
And the other thing important for pollinators is don't chop down your flowering plants, all of them, all the time. It's best to leave the hollow stems or the pithy stems because that's where the insects spend their winter.
Oh yeah.
And so to preserve the beneficial insects, you should leave those up and not cut them down.
Sure, that makes sense.
So in other words, if you have a manicured place like a lawn, that's the worst you can do because that's not going to be good for the wildlife or insects.
Yeah.
And the reason why the birds are having trouble because the insects are dying off, particularly with not only development, but pesticides and those problems, herbicides that people use. You want to minimize the use of those. And what happens is if you spray with those, you kill off the good insects too, and then you create more of a problem. Then you become dependent on pesticides. So you're better off not using it all. Yeah. Here we let nature take care of the pests.
Sure. Yeah.
So we have natural pesticide system, but in order for that to work, you have to have a diversity of plants. Okay. In order for that to work properly.
Yeah, we have a big area of lawn that I want to get rid of it and just plant natives, but I don't know the best way to get rid of the lawn other than just coming in with a machine
solarization is probably your best way.
Yeah.
So basically you put cloth down and let the sun kill it in the summer. Okay. And then you can plant it the next season. Usually. Okay. The alternative is to put something down and put about 6 inches of mulch on top. But that takes longer.
I did cardboard and then mulch on top of that.
But that takes quite a while.
It does, yeah.
And the thing is, that doesn't guarantee that you kill your seed bed. Right. So I think solarization, even though I've done the former with the mulch. Yeah. But solarization now is probably the best for a large area.
Okay. I'll try that.
Just look under solarization to get rid of lawn. You Google that and that will give you I don't think I don't think I talk about that in the book,
Okay.
but that would probably be your best approach.
Yeah.
Now in the Prima Giardino, we actually just dug up and then turned it upside down.
Oh.
And as long as you get out the roots,
Right.
that will take care of it. But that's a
That's
very
smart.
labor
Slow.
intensive.
Yes. Yeah. Kind of ready to just pay a
But-
young kid to come in and do it.
Yeah, but then you are tilling and disturbing the soil. And
Yeah.
with solarization,
And
you should
don't-
actually start now. Is a great time to start immediately.
Okay.
Because you need the hot weather.
Yeah. Well, I'm a teacher and I'm on summer vacation, so I'll
Okay.
start tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you find out which is the best plastic you put over there,
Okay.
and once you know, and put that down, and then you just leave it go
Okay.
all throughout the entire summer.
Okay. And then can I leave it there over the winter too? And then,
Yeah, but I would follow, what they recommend,
oh yeah.
and then I'll review. If you have any doubts, you tell me what they recommend, and I'll tell you if it sounds reasonable.
Okay.
You have to be very careful from what you read, because you Google
Yeah.
stuff. Unfortunately, I know a lot about it, so I can make a judgment
Yeah.
about what's working. I mean, like if you use black, it's going to absorb the heat,
Right.
but that may still not be the most effective way. So I think you need to check. I'm not sure
Okay.
right now,
Yeah.
but I think that's probably your best bet. I mean, the
Sounds
alternative
good.
is try different sections and see what works the best.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have an area, if you're willing to do that, but I think for your purposes, I would think that's probably the best approach.
Yeah.
And I think you have enough time yet. I don't know whether, we're already in the middle of June, you want to start immediately.
Yeah.
Because I think it takes 3 good months
Okay.
of warm weather and sun
Oh,
in
yeah.
order to kill. And you barely have, where Septembers are generally warm
Right.
and sunny, so it may be
Perfect.
sufficient
Yeah.
to get rid of most of it. So if you get, if you get 80 or 90% of the seed that's kill the grass,
Yeah.
the grass will go down easier
Yeah.
than some of your weed seed.
Okay.
So I don't think there'll be a problem with the grass. So
Yeah. Yeah.
now if you do it, but there'll be some weed seed beds, but you can
Yeah.
deal with those
Sure.
when they come up as you do planting.
Yeah.
That's probably manageable.
Yes.
And particularly if you overuse. The good thing about using arbor chips,
You might want to. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Bye. Come back again. Okay, did that take care of it?
Yeah,
You
that
have
was
enough
great.
information? You have my contact?
I do.
Okay.
Yes. So your next book is coming out in April
Right.
of next year.
I think you can pre-order it by the first of the year, but we're
Okay.
not sure. We're trying to push that because I plan to speak at the Northwest Garden Show, which I have
Oh.
already 3 times. For every
Yeah.
book I've
Yeah.
spoke there,
Oh.
and that's many, thousands of people come there.
Yes.
And we hope to have, even though the book may not be ready, but they should be able to order the book when I'm
Mhm.
speaking in February.
Yeah.
That's a plan, and we're trying to push it to go as fast as possible.
Yeah. That's very
Right.
exciting.
So,
Thank you so much.
you're welcome.
Yeah.
So my other book that I'm working on, actually
Yeah.
I'm almost done with another book.
Yeah.
So I'm a busy guy. So it's called The Beauty and Resilience of Nature.
Okay.
And then it deals with restoration and conservation.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very general
Yeah.
book, but it relates to what we're talking about.
Yeah.
directly.
I
So
wonder-
basically what the whole message is, we need to take care of the environment.
Yeah.
And in this new book, I talk about, the benefits of having a good environment in nature.
Right.
And it's clear that, it's important for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And, the developers here in Kitsap, for example, is no different than where you are.
Yeah.
They strip everything
I know.
and start. And then they do some token trees, and that's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So that's not good. I mean, we're blessed here in this area with, a beautiful nature,
Right.
but development is destroying it. So it's
Yeah.
a problem.
Yeah.
It's even worse in other places, but
Yeah.
it's happening here. So we have to, hopefully would, develop more sustainably and
Yeah.
use sustainable practices.
Right.
it's, we're inundated with plastic and garbage and synthetic fertilizers and pesticides. We don't fertilize anything.
Yeah.
And what happens when people use excess fertilizer, and that's true of most gardeners, it gets out.
Yeah.
It goes into the soil.
Right.
Non-water.
Right.
And then it causes the algae blooms and all those problems.
Yeah.
All that can be avoided by doing things in a better way.
Right. Well, I would like to leave my garden better for the next
And
person.
same thing with water. If you have a flat area, you could probably do drip irrigation,
Yeah,
which would take less water and plant it.
Yeah, I have my ADD won't let me focus long enough to put in a drip system, but I do have a soaker hose, which is not the most effective, but it's better than, you know,
right. Probably use less water.
better than nothing.
Yeah, if you water early in the morning and then cover your soaker hose with some mulch.
Yes.
I think that's a good approach. I do mention those things
Okay.
in my book. Well, I hope that gets you started.
Yes, thank you so much. I will definitely be back to visit too.
Okay.
Yeah. Beautiful.
So this is going to be, this whole thing here that's blooming, it's going to bloom in the fall with blue flowers. It's called plumbago.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's very nice.
Yeah.
And that's crabapple. Crabapple do very well here.
Okay.
So that's prairie fire, and the other one is royal raindrops.
Okay.
There's also a golden raindrop. Those are two very good crabapples.
Yeah, I go to Valley Nursery whenever I can, and I see a lot of their crab apples.
If you're a member, you get 10% off. Did you get a membership?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
And you also, Gig Harbor, I don't know, do we have I don't think Gig Harbor, did they give us a 10%? The Woodbrook, I think they did too.
Oh, I've only been there once. I need to go there again.
I'm pretty sure Woodbrook, Valley, and Bainbridge, whatever the one in Bainbridge is, will give you a discount.
Okay.
You just have to show your membership.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are a lot of natives that you can, for ground covers. Let me show you just an example. Go back.
Okay.
So these are all, well, this is just candy tuft. And we don't fertilize this, but what we had included, but most of it's dying off, we included clover, and clover fixes nitrogen.
Oh, really?
So just like anything from the pea family also fixes nitrogen. So that adds nitrogen, and you don't have to fertilize. So you always think about that if you're gardening or doing vegetable gardening. If you plant pea plants, that will put nitrogen in your soil. Yeah. And so these are all pen stamens, see them? All that's pen stamens.
Yeah.
All this is pen stamens. Candy stuff. Then you have your native yarrow.
Yeah.
Black-eyed Susan coming up.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Monarda.
Monarda.
Yeah.
Yes. So
I just planted some of that.
That's a beautiful one, isn't it? Okay.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right. Thanks, everybody. See you in the next one. Bye.